Hi everyone, today we're going to go back into looking at Notion builds for a life operating system. There have been so many new database related features that Notion has released. So I want to walk through how to take our Notion databases for our PPV system or our Life OS to the next level. So this is all about next level Notion database design using all the new features they've released in the past few months. There are tons of stuff. It helps us bring systems together. The database feature in Notion is really what helps us design systems, the integration, the information flow informing one part informing another. The automations tend to be tied to database relations and rollups and connectivity, and then interface design that we can get our work done quickly and with clarity more precisely. So all that is enhanced when we enhance our databases. So that's why I wanted to do a video where we get up to speed. The first 40 or so videos of this channel have all been about building the Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults system, the PPV system, which became so popular. So many people are using it now, but with all these new features, I wanted to do a video just to talk about how we can bring these new features into that system. But really, this applies to any Notion build or any system. So this is just really using the PPV system as an example, how to implement and apply all these great new database features we've been getting from Notion. They've been on a roll lately, so let's put them to good use. So let's go to the screen share and we'll walk through a bunch of examples and a bunch of demos on these new features. So we're going to start in a more simplified version of the action zone. The action zone is well documented in previous videos. I'll link to it below the kickoff video, and there's a whole playlist that takes you through this if this is new to you, but this is where we do our focus in the PPV system. Focus on our action list, the things we're going to accomplish today. We got our calendar view down here. This is a very simplified version of it. I just want to focus on the key databases so that we can look at how these new features would be implemented. Now, the first feature isn't even something to see, but they have improved the speed of large databases by 2.5 times. So that's fantastic right off the bat. I mean, that may be one of the biggest benefits, even though there's not much for us to demo, but databases are going to be faster to load, faster to interact with. So that's awesome off the bat. Glad they're working on the back end as well as adding features. So in terms of actual features, a quick one just to demonstrate here, we can now select these cells as we always could, but now there's a little handle here. You can click that handle and drag it down. And just like in Excel or Google Sheets you may be familiar with, this lets you drag them down. I'll undo that with the Command Z. Or if you highlight multiple cells and hit Command D on a Mac or Control D on a PC, it'll fill them in. Or of course, if you want to override something, you can just drag all the way over something else, it'll write over it. A small but nice touch that can be useful. I know I use that a lot in spreadsheets, so I can imagine I'll use it a lot here in Notion databases. Something that I'm sure you've discovered by now is the side peek as you click and open a entry in a database, but something you may not have noticed that I found quite helpful is that you can actually resize it. If you click here, you can make it small or you can make it large, or anything in between. And once you set it for one distance, you could then anything else you open in that database will be at that distance. So that's quite nice. You can customize how much that side peek opens. And of course, once a side peek is open, you still have access to the database in here. You can switch to different ones and you can interact with the data in the existing larger view of the database, even with the side view open. So that's quite nice. And then you can escape key. Sometimes it takes multiple taps to back out of the side view, but it'll close. So that's a really great feature and really one of my favorite ones, of course. So you can set it to be side peek, center peek. Center peek is the traditional one we've always seen, and full page would be a full open for the entire page. Some databases, you want to go into the full page directly. You have that option. Once you set it for a database, it will be set for that database ongoing. So database, you can make the choice. And once you set it, that becomes the default for that database. But I did want to highlight the ability on the side peek to change the width because I hadn't seen that discussed much. And I think that makes that feature even more valuable. But now I want to jump into something more substantive, which is a new way we can look at our today action items and map out our day either during the day as we're implementing our priorities or at the end of the day when we're mapping out tomorrow, rolling forward anything we didn't finish and mapping out the week. Now, traditionally we have this, and we of course always had our calendar, but sometimes the calendar can be a lot of stuff and it's more than just the next few days. What might be valuable is to have a board view that's automated. Now, this is set up to show us today, tomorrow, and the next 7 days. And I'm going to show you an even better way to do this in a moment that I prefer. But in the past, to have a board view with this week or some view of the upcoming days, you had to assign the selector to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or first, second, third day. And then you had to manually attach each entry to one of those selector properties. And I just found that to be not worth the effort to constantly be assigning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to different tasks and entries. But now we can automate it, and I think this is great. So the way we create this, let's create a whole new one so you can see how it's done from scratch. We create a new table. Of course, we have the option now to bring in any source database into the same block. So these tabs can show different views of different databases if you wish. But we're going to use the same one. And of course, you would switch the source here. If it's not one of the recommended ones, you would type it in. But we're going to use the same one so we can see how we can have a board view of days in a way that's done with automation, not with you manually assigning tags or selector properties. So we do this. We want to choose a board view. And then by default, it has a grouping by who knows what. It seems random. I don't even know how it selects. But once you set it up, you can choose what it's grouped by. And what we want to do is group by due date, DO date. For those new to the PPV system, we use a unique approach. We don't use DUE dates where we want something completed by. We use the date. We set the date for each active action item or task to the date we intend to do it on. It can always be managed and juggled or pushed forward. And I have previous videos on that. I'll link to those below as well. But by setting this due date, we have not only the ability to have very effective calendar views and ensure that nothing slips through the cracks and hold us accountable so we're only adding things to our task list that we're willing to actually commit a time on our schedule for. So it holds us to a higher standard. We don't just throw random things on our task list. By doing it by the due date, we now have the ability to create this board view by due date. And it's going to give us automation. So as things in the future roll into the current date and the current week, they will just appear because everything that's active has a due date, every task. Now, there are tasks attached to projects that are queued up into the future. That's fine. That's part of the project management. But every project that's active has some active tasks. They all have due dates and they are all rolling into here. And any solo task that we add is going to have a DO due date and it's going to automatically roll into here. It's the beauty of the PPV system that it brings this automation to our action zone, current week, and current date view. By having that due date as part of our process and system, we can now have this board view totally automated. By default, it's going to have this no due date column. We're just going to want to hide this. The ones that don't have due dates are either part of projects or completed or not active tasks for various reasons. But we hide that first one, and now we have today, tomorrow, the next 7 days, and the next 30 days. So if you scroll down to the calendar, you get a sense of how it's laid out here, but this gives us a more consolidated view. Now we definitely want to have property visibility and sorting by the priorities that we've set. So when we click on properties, this is going to be new if you're new to the new databases. All of the functionality for any database is now under this 3-dot icon here. And we can do anything we can do to a database, we can do it here. We have filter, sort here as well as here, but many other features, and we'll touch on some of these. So in order to control which properties are visible, we want to come down here and we want to see priority here. So anything we click on the eyeball, it'll make it visible. And then we go back and we can sort by priority. It adds a sort item, and now they're in the proper order of the way we've structured our priorities. This is also covered in previous videos on our action zone, but now we're implementing it in a board view with automation, with everything, all your tasks just rolling into the proper column automatically. Now, with any new database view, we want to add the proper filters. So we'll add status. Status is active. This is only for active tasks. Non-active tasks, we don't want them in our action zone view. But you'll notice we now have a new way to look at filters. When you just add one like I did, it's just a quick filter, which is a one-factor filter. But we typically want to have multiple factors to screen by. So to do that now, we click on the 3 dots and we add to advanced filter. Advanced filter is what we're used to. That's what we've always seen before. It has all the capabilities and works the same way as previously. We just have to add a simple filter to an advanced filter if we want to step up its functionality. So in addition to a task being active, we want to make sure the task is also not already completed. So done is unchecked would be another important filter. And we've set our sorting by priority. We would also typically want to set our sorting by due date, not because we want the dates to sort, because they're sorting by column. Although for the 7-day and 30-day, it would be helpful to have them sort by dates as well. So the newer ones are first. But as the second sort rule, it's after priority. But the main reason we sort by due date is so that if you have multiple scheduled events with times during the same day, it'll sort them in order. So a 1 p.m. meeting will appear before a 2 p.m. meeting. If we have scheduled items, scheduled is one of our options here. So we now have this board view, and this is great. This is pretty cool. But I do find that, today is useful, tomorrow's useful, but 7 days is clumping a lot of stuff together, and that's not very helpful to me. And then 30 days is even less helpful. It's just a lot of stuff jumbled in there. So what I find is even more valuable than this is to go into our grouping function. Again, we have it already set the due date. And by default, it's relative. And this is relative. Today, tomorrow, next 7, next 30. If you change that to day, and then you again hide the ones that don't have any due date property, and it actually goes out quite a long way in terms of day by day. You don't need it to go that far. So let's add another filter that the due date is on or before 1 week from now. So it'll just show us out 1 week. And that'll be a 1 week view of individual days. So today is September 7th, tomorrow is the 8th, the 9th, the 10th. Now you have a wonderful view here. So it has some similarities to our calendar view down here, but the calendar view, especially depending on what you're showing, it may be a lot of stuff on your screen. Here you can simplify and have bigger blocks. You can have more information if you want with less around it, just looking at today and the next several days. So you can really resort and schedule and juggle dates very quickly and efficiently with a nice view here, entirely automated. As tasks in the future approach, they'll just roll in day by day, and you'll have the clarity you need. So I wanted to make that option available to you and let you know that we now have the capability to do this, which we didn't a while ago. And another feature just recently introduced is the ability to edit properties within a board view. So say we want to change the priority here. You just click here. Previously, you had to actually open the entire card and then adjust it in here. Now, anything that's visible in the board view can be changed in the board view. If we go over to the content pipeline, for example, we might have a lot of data visible in here. I know I typically do in my actual production one there. So you may have a lot of information for each card. For each card, you can enter, change it, modify it, change dates. You open the date property, all from just looking at the card in the board view. It gives us a lot more quick and easy access to make changes and adjust things. So that's wonderful. So while we're here in the content pipeline, I'll demonstrate how we can use the new status property type. This is a new type of property we didn't have before. In the past, let's switch over to the table view. It's usually easier to see how something's set up or to build a new table or database in table view. In the past, we would do status using a select property, a single select property. And depending on the property that you selected, you'd have this sequence in this order. And then when you did a board view, grouping by status, it would do this pipeline with various columns and stages to move each item through as you progressed along these different columns because of the status headers and the status property, which are all listed here. But we have a new property designed to be a status, not just a selector applied to be a status property. So now what we do, if you want to change and use the new status property, you can convert any selector property over to a status property. It will keep all the settings you already have. So let's do that here. I'll show you how it works, and then I'll show you what benefits you get by doing that. So we click this. You see it's set as a select property with a check. We're going to change it to status. That's a new one. And now when we open it, it's now listed as a status property. We have all of the previous status settings we had, plus 3 groupings. The to-do grouping, which is things we intend to do. The in-progress grouping, which are things that are underway at various stages. And then complete, meaning they are past the point of each stage of progression, and now they are completed. But it throws all of them into all of our previous settings into the first one, and it adds 3 new ones. It adds the not started, in progress, and done, which are not very useful to us. So let's modify this to make it more useful to the way we want to work. So we click status type, actually let's click edit property, and we get all of these here. Now, one is a default. That means when you create a new property entry, it's going to by default apply that one. So let's make next up our default, set as default. And ask you if you want to continue, and you do. You can't delete a default one. So you have to make something else the default. And then we can delete this one they added because we don't need it because we already have more precision with the ones we have. We don't need a general in progress or done. We just want to have the different stages that we've already created grouped in these new groupings. And now we can sort our existing ones out. So now published means completed. Ready to post is the last stage of in progress. Editing is in progress. Recording is in progress. We'll keep them in the order we want. Writing is in progress. And potential ideas are an upcoming one to do. Scheduled and next up mean they're upcoming. They're things we're planning to do. So with that all set, we come over here and look at the status setting, and we've got these 3 groupings with all of our existing stages of process toward the point of completion. And they're grouped in a much nicer way, so it's easier to see and select them quickly. And it's also easier for someone new that you might be sharing this with on your team to understand what each means because they're now grouped into categories. Now, you can do a few things that are now capable because of these groupings. So we have the groupings. We can now create a board view of them. The existing board view is here, but let's show how we might create this from scratch. Select our property controls here. Sources, content pipeline. We want to change it to a board instead of a table, but by default, it's grouping by the owner, and that's not what we want here. We want to group by the status property, so we're clicking status property. Now that's selected, and now it's grouping by all those things that we had moved into the 3 different groupings for the status property. So this is pretty much what we had before, except that when we add something, we have those groupings. But you also have the option now, instead of grouping by each individual precise state in the process, you can group by the grouping. So if you choose that, it will bundle all the to-dos, which are things you intend to do, into one. Remember that had multiple stages, but it puts all of them together into one. This puts all of the in progress into one column, and this puts all of the completed into one column. So if you wanted an overview, a bird's eye summary of what's in the larger groupings, you can do it that way. Though really the vast majority of the time, you're going to want to have these set up by the individual options or individual stages. That's just a lot more useful in most cases. One other thing to be aware of when doing the status property, do edit property here, you have the ability to show as a checkbox or a select. In the vast majority of cases, select's going to be more useful. You can select the actual precise stage. You do have the ability to do checkbox, but typically checkbox is relevant only at the last stage, and then it's completed. It's going to be misleading if it's appearing in middle stages. And really, you don't want to just check it. You want to advance it to the next state of the process, either by clicking here in a table or in a board. So I don't actually find the checkbox in most cases useful, though there could be scenarios that you encounter. I want you to be aware that that option is there. So jumping over to the alignment zone, we can look at some more examples of new features. So let's look at how we might apply the new feature that Notion gave us in terms of progress bars. This is now integrated. In the past, we can see, for example, in projects here, there was this property here, a formula property, where we put this long, complicated formula in, and it would give us a progress bar, basically by just measuring progress off of another number in another property. And that was nice because it gave us this visual indicator. But now we can do it with a built-in feature, and it works better in a few ways. We used to have that here in the outcome goals. In the case of the outcome goals, the progress bar was based on the % completed number. So it would take that % completed and give us the visual progress bar depiction. But now, since we can do it natively in Notion without the big formula, here's how you do it. And you can do this for any number in a Notion database property. So we just click on this, hit edit property, and number is the default, but you can add a progress bar just like that. And you can pick whatever color you want, and then you've got your progress bar. Alternately, click on edit property, you can have a ring, a percentage ring. And that gives us a nice visual depiction on how things are going, and it does not require the additional property that the progress bar formula used to require. Now, in dealing with percentages, which is when I typically apply a progress bar, it's easy. You get the ability to choose the number format. If it's a percentage, then it's out of 100 because that's the definition of a percentage. If it's not a percentage, now say this was not % completed, but it was steps towards completion and there were 7 steps. So we could now change the property to a number, choose bar, and now we can choose divide by, which means we can say there's 7 steps, so we're dividing by 7. So it's going to calculate these numbers based on how close it is to completing all 7. So it'll give us a 3 out of 7, 6 out of 7, 2 out of 7 progress bar or ring, whichever you prefer. But again, I tend to typically do this with percentages. Now, initially, when they first rolled this feature out, and I think you'll see in most of the online tutorials, there was a problem in that roll-ups wouldn't work with these progress bars. If you look here, this was based on a roll-up. The percentage tasks completed, if we get that property, percentage tasks completed, if we make that visible, and look at it here, and bring that over here, this is actually a roll-up, rolling up from somewhere else. And initially, and in many of the other tutorials, you see that this cannot be done into a roll-up, and there was a workaround creating a mirrored formula. But now, if you click Edit Property here, we now have the ability to apply the native progress bar to roll-ups as well. Other advancements we've seen are in relational property connections. So if we're going to connect using a relation property, if we want to connect to other databases, which is essential to having a comprehensive system, when we click that cell to make the relational connection, we now have a cleaner view of the options to choose from. So it's going to show us the ones that are linked and all of the others. This is a cleaner view than we ever had before. So now when we want to go and choose our relational connections, let's say we didn't have any, we have a cleaner view. And as we choose them, it's showing us what we've chosen here, and it makes it easier to choose them. It's giving us better recommendations. In addition to that, we can now see properties, and that might help us in making better selections. So say we want to see which are active. We would make that visible here. Say we want to see what the status is. So it's going to show us this information as we're looking through the options to choose to add to the selections here, the relational properties. In addition, when we now open this, the property view in here is going to show us those additional properties we've asked to see when viewing the relational entries we're connecting from this database to that database. So these will be visible inside the card, but not in here. Though when we go here to select them, they are visible. And we can choose any property we want from the other database or turn them off when we're done, which is quite nice. And in addition, a brand new feature, when we open one of these properties, let's go to a full page here. If one of these relations has a lot in here, sometimes it's hard to work with buried in the list of standard properties here. We now have the ability to click on the 6-dot handle here and show as, not just as a property or minimal, we go minimal and it'll show less. And of course we can always hide it. That's an option as well. We can go to hide property and then it's just tucked away below and you can access it again by opening the toggle. But the new feature is show as a page section. You click page section here and it takes the property up here and puts it down here as a page section and then gives us the ability to add properties that might be useful or helpful. And it creates a separate section for that relational property that was formerly up here and then it removes it from up here. To be honest, it doesn't give you that much functionality because it's not like it's a block that you can move and embed lower in the page or in the dashboard. It just creates a section for it at the bottom. But depending on what that property is and how much you had in there, this is sometimes going to be a nicer view, a more organized view. In addition, there are lots of little features. For example, a lot of these titles we've had. So here, habits is getting cut off. Habits and routines is a little bit longer, but we don't want to keep the column that wide. Now, unlike before, you can hover over this and the full title will pop up. Instead of having to open it to read it, you can just hover and it will give you a pop-up with the full name. Now, as you're seeing, it's a little slow. It takes a while for that pop-up to arrive. You just have to wait a couple seconds, or of course, you can widen the column. That's a new feature that Notion has added to databases. I think it's a great addition. I just would like to see it a little bit faster. When creating a new relational property, by the way, we no longer can insert left and right, which is so frustrating because that was my favorite way to add new properties. You can't just insert left and have a new property in the place you want it. You have to either go to the end of the column, which, by the way, holding shift and doing your scroll wheel will scroll horizontally. Every time I mention that, I get a lot of comments of how excited that discovery was from a few people. Without shift, it scrolls up and down. With shift, it scrolls right and left. If you hit plus, you can add a new property that way, or you can go in here and choose properties and then do new property. If we're adding a new relational property, if you scroll down to the advanced properties, add relation, you can add a connection from outcome goals to any other database. Let's say we're adding it to projects, and now you can name it nicely at the top here, name it to projects. There is already one, so it's adding a number to the second one. We'll call that projects 2. Now, by default, this relational link will be from outcome goals, this database, to the other one, but it will not automatically create the reverse relation from the other database, in this case projects, back to this database, unless you check this toggle. And then it gives you the option to name it, and it will then create the reverse relation as well. Previously, it would always do the reverse relation. Now, by default, it'll just be one way from the one you're creating it in, but if you want the two-way coming back, you add that. It will, by default, create the title of that property in the other database to be the name of the database you're in, which is perfect most of the time. Or you can add a new one. You could say outcome goals custom name, just to show we're creating a custom name here, and anything you want. Before, it used to have this long convoluted name. You'd have to change it, but you usually forget to change it. So you'd discover it later and you'd be like, what is this property? And you'd have to figure it out. So now you can do a custom name. We just created this new property here called projects 2. We'll link to an entry in that database. Now we'll click on that and we'll go over to that. The reverse is established here. If we didn't do that toggle here, it would not have that reverse relation when we created it. So now you can have the option to have a one-way without a two-way relational property link, and that reduces the number of properties in the other database if it's not needed. Now, sometimes we have titles, like here we have this is titled here, and then we have another title of the same name here. We now have the ability to hide a database title, so it's only titled once. That's a nice little touch. In the past, if we had a lot of relational entries or a lot of anything in a particular cell, you had the ability to turn on wrap so that it would wrap and show multiple lines and extend the height of any entry or any row here so that everything would show, but it was all or nothing. Now we can go one by one individually and choose which we want to wrap and show, all of the entries, make this taller so it all fits and it's all readable, whereas other ones don't have to wrap. So this one's not wrapping. The projects here is wrapping. Pillars is not wrapping. If we wanted pillars to wrap also, we could turn that on and we have the ability to wrap. So more control and flexibility in terms of making your data visible to you. Another nice feature in the past, when we go to a database, let's go to the source database page. This is the actual database. In the past, we could export the database contents, but the problem is it would export absolutely every entry in the database in the CSV file. A CSV file is an export of basically a database or spreadsheet file that can be imported into another database or spreadsheet application, such as Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or Airtable. If you want to bring it out, take it over there for charting and graphing or for any reason, you could export the database. But the problem is it would take everything in the database out. Now you can choose to set your filters however you wish, and whatever you're filtering for, you can now export just the filtered items. And so instead of doing everything, which was previously the only option, now we recently got the ability to export the current view, and it'll export only the entries under the current filtered criteria. So it limits what we export. It gives us much more control over what we're exporting and then re-importing. And then beyond that, it's really just the new ways that databases work. Sort and filter, as we talked about, sort works the same. Filter starts as a simple filter. You add whatever you want, but if you want to actually make it more complex, you have to click add to advanced filters, as I mentioned previously, and that gives you all the capability of what we previously had. Or you can use just a very quick, simple one. And if you're on a team plan, when you make changes like this, it'll ask you whether you want to apply these to everyone or just leave them unique to your view of that database. So it's nice in a team environment to be able to make your own filters and tweaks and customizations to the filtering, but not have it apply to everybody. Or wait till you're finished and then apply it to everyone. Also nice for teams. You now have the ability to lock an individual database. Previously, you could lock it up here, but that would lock everything and you couldn't interact with the data and couldn't work with it. Now you could lock the database and it's going to lock all the property settings, the column order, the type of database view. Like we can't switch from a table to a board view anymore, but you can interact with the data. You can make changes to any of the information inside of it. So this prevents others on your team from messing up the view and the layout and the filtering, but let them interact with the data to do their work and to contribute to it and to access it. So that's a really nice new feature to change, to get access to changing it. You just have to unlock it, but it prevents accidental mistakes from people who are not sure how to properly interact with the database. It limits access to just using the database, not designing the database. For the last demo, let's jump back to the action zone. You go down here. I've been showing you how to adjust and modify existing databases, and many of you already have your PPV system or similar life management system. But if you're building a new database from scratch or embedding a linked database, it's a little bit different now. In the past, you could hit / select through all the different options. To do an embedded database, though, I find it's / or just to type linked. Then it gives you the very specific linked view of a database. And from here, you can select the source database from any other existing database, or you can create a new database if this is a brand new one. If you're pulling from another one, say projects here, now you have the ability to take any of the existing setups in terms of views and filters and layouts of tables or boards or anything, and select any of those original ones. So if you're reusing a look of a formatting of a database many times in different parts of your system, it's worth setting up properly the way you like it in the source database. And then each new one, you can pick that option from the existing setups and views of that database. And then you can customize beyond that once it comes in. But it lets you get that head start of having it laid out and designed the way you want. It used to come in all jumbled and random, and you'd have to start each new design from scratch. Now it lets you pull in an existing formatting and layout and setup of a database. And again, across the tables here, we can add any new view, and any new view inside this tab column across the top can be a different database now. So now this is the projects database. This is an outcome goals database. Or if you don't want to create a linked database, you can just create a brand new one, clicking link database and choose new database. Now you're creating one from scratch. You're setting up an initial database, choose your layout. But as usual, all the controls are in here under this 3-dot icon. You can do anything you want, all laid out here. Or if you want to set the settings for an individual property, you just click that header and choose edit property. It gives you all the controls for that individual property, which is a subcategory of the larger property and database control settings. And that's pretty much it. So nothing revolutionary, just a lot of tweaks, formatting approaches, and quite a few number of new, smaller, even mid-size-ish features that streamline, give you more customizability, more connectivity, and a little bit easier usage. So I hope that's helpful. That's an overview of all the new database features and some ideas on how to integrate them into either the PPV system that we use and have taught on this channel, or really any workspace that you're using. The database features and databases themselves in Notion are really the most powerful part of Notion. So I wanted to really dive into that. I don't tend to go over every little feature that Notion comes out with, but since we're all about building systems here, and the databases are how systems interconnect in Notion, I wanted to cover that and give an update on how we can enhance and take our Notion, LifeOS, PPV, or any system up to the next level of database usage, since we have so many new ways to tweak and modify and customize our databases, and Notion's been on an absolute tear lately with new features. So let me know below if this was helpful. I definitely want to get a sense from you if these kinds of updates are valuable, and if so, we'll mix them in as we develop the ongoing content pipeline here for this channel. I have so many different ideas and so many different things coming, so I'm super excited to be able to do an update, but then bounce into new stuff and cover many different elements of life design and life system building on this channel. So that's what this is all about. That's what we're doing here. If this is of interest, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get updates on future videos. And please hit like if you found this video valuable. Leave thoughts or questions below, or join us in the Notion Life Design course to explore these topics more extensively. That's at notionlifedesign.com. I also write the Life Design newsletter on increasing human capability. I give away several of my best Notion templates to anyone who subscribes to the free newsletter. The newsletter link is also below in the show notes. Thanks for watching. Lots more to come.